we've got a great segment now with Congressman Maxwell Frost, young superstar of our party, who's, in addition to just being a great guy, is working his butt off in this election to speak to young voters. This is National Voter Registration Week. And so we just are really excited to hear from the congressman about what he's seeing on the ground as he's traveling all over the country. What's the vibe out there? What is he learning? And so, Congressman, welcome. And we'd love to get your thoughts about, you've been out there working really hard, and what are you seeing on the ground?
Well, I'm really proud to be on the Vice President's National Advisory Board for her campaign. And part of what I do is travel to make sure that we connect with all different kinds of voters. And about a few days after the DNC, I went on a tour. It was a back to school tour, campuses in 4 states in 5 days. So we started in North Carolina, then I went to Arizona, then I went to Michigan, and then Pennsylvania. And we did 2 to 3 campuses per state. And the energy was amazing. I was a bit surprised, to be honest, when I got up early, on that first tour date to go to UNC Chapel Hill. We went to an event at someone's house. And so, the purpose of this tour right after the DNC was for me to go and speak with the most highly engaged organizers on campus to get them excited about growing the coalition. Then on October, a lot of surrogates will double back to these campuses and we'll do bigger events. So this is, these are supposed to be kind of smaller groups, if that makes sense. Well, we pull up. This first one has about 100 students packed into this house on I think it was like a Monday or Tuesday morning, which it's hard to get students to do anything in the morning. And they were fired up and so excited about electing the vice president to be the next president. And they were excited about making sure that we take this movement and this energy that we see online and we take it from vibes and make it into votes. And that is really what they're excited about. And what I told them is, they are the ones that are going to be responsible for taking this national movement that the vice president has started and really bringing it home on campus for their peers and for the people around them. And something I always try to tell student organizers is, that the privilege and opportunity to organize on campus is an ever fleeting opportunity. And when you leave school to go reach the voters you want to reach, you got to go knock on their doors. We got to go call them, which is all really important. And we're going to do that. But student organizers see the people they want to talk to every day on campus. And the really cool thing is it allows us to speak with them in many different ways. And so instead of inviting people to our table, we get to go to theirs. And it's something that students have a unique privilege and ability to do. And so I was just really excited. So the vibes are great, but what's even greater is students are ready to take it from vibes into votes, from online into organizing. And that's how we're going to win this thing.
That's so great to hear that the enthusiasm is just as high, if not higher, on the ground where you're going than online, because that's the question I wanted to ask you. Focused on the online space at Courier and really understanding the need to flood the zone and to be reaching young people in as authentic ways as possible where they're spending their time. We obviously invest very heavily in TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat for Messenger to be able to reach young folks. And we did see, right, after the ticket changed and the vice president was on the top of the ticket, that we went from an insane index of pro-Trump and anti-Biden content to actually the inverse, with an enormous amount of pro-Kamala and anti-Trump content on TikTok because of the way those algorithms work. We've talked about on this show. And one of the things that I actually worry about is that because of the organic nature and the open kind of algorithm of TikTok, that, we can sort of feel that the vibes are better than they are because of the sort of concentrated hyper enthusiasm and engagement among folks, because it's hard to tell how widespread it is. So do you feel a distinction between offline and online? And what's some of sort of the best type of work you've seen happen in the online space to actually make that conversion from vibes to votes, as you said?
Well, there's a few things. Like the first thing is we have a lot of different ways to tell, is it just a mirage online? Is it real? Right. And so part of it is obviously we're seeing a lot of the polling numbers. We're seeing that when young people are polled, they are overwhelmingly going to vote for Kamala Harris and they're excited to do so. Energy has gone up. But the polls also show us this is still going to be a close race, right? So that helps bring us down to earth per se, to really understand that we have high energy, but it's still going to take a lot of work because, believe it or not, there are a lot of people on the other side of the aisle that are excited about President Trump. He has a very cult-like base, but then there's a very significant part of the Republican Party that don't like Trump. And so they're asking themselves, do I vote for Kamala? Do I not vote? Do I hold my breath and vote for Trump? And those are some folks who are also going for as well. And you've seen, number one, two former Republican vice presidents come out and say they're not supporting President Trump, and a litany of former Trump officials saying they're not going to support, former President Trump. And so I think it just shows that the vice president has an opportunity to build a really broad coalition here, which is one of the hallmarks of the Democratic Party, is that we will have very progressive people like myself, very excited about being a part of this party. And we can have moderate folks, and we can even have conservative folks who align themselves with us, not because they agree with us on all the issues, but because they agree with us on democracy. And democracy is something that we cannot agree to disagree on. And that's what Trump wants to do. So we have a lot of ways to bring us down to earth to understand the energy is high online, but it's not just online. We got to look at how are we going to win this on the ground. And the vice president said herself, we are the underdog in this race. She is going against a former president, someone who is now going to be on the ballot for the third time, who has a lot of resources and a cult like fan base. And people who are going to show up to vote. So we got to make sure our people show up to vote as well. The other thing I'd say too, in terms of the campaign, is I'm asked what makes Kamala different. Why is this energy like this? Well, the reason why is she has done something that is rare in politics, and she has blurred the lines between culture and the campaign, and that's a really good thing. Culture is like the untapped resource of social movements and political campaigns. So she's gone from being a political candidate for a campaign to being a political figure in a political movement that is integrated within our culture. And the thing here is a lot of politicians seek to do the same thing, and they seek to use the culture to win a campaign. But that's not what Kamala's doing. She's not trying to use the culture to win. She just wants to be a part of it. She wants to be a part of the conversation. And when you do that, it's organic. And when you do that, people actually feel like, wow, this is someone who's authentic and someone who isn't shoving it down my throat or like shoving it in my face, but they're just laying out there what they believe in. And I actually agree with them. And I think this content is funny and this content's serious. The interesting thing about the VP is she was going viral on TikTok before she became the presumptive nominee. Why? Because of the coconut tree thing and all this, which has humor to it. But here's the thing: these humorous moments of authenticity brought a lot of people in, and then they stayed to listen to the issues and the content about what's at stake this election. And again, that's culture. I think back to March for Our Lives. I remember I was at the Orlando March for Our Lives, and I'm looking at the crowd and I see people I grew up with who I know hate politics or had never been to a political event. So I went up to some of them and I said, "Why are you here? Like, I'm just curious." Somebody goes, "Well, my friends were here, and so I came with my friends." Someone else goes, "I don't know how to explain it. I just felt like I needed to be here." Someone goes, "Ariana Grande told me to be here," right? And all of these answers showed that the March for Our Lives movement bridged that gap between cool and consciousness between culture and civics. And it's interesting because when people can't necessarily articulate why they felt like they needed to be somewhere, that's actually a really good indicator that we've gone beyond rhetoric and into the culture of a country, which again is an untapped potential. And that's what's going on with Kamala. At a lot of these events I was at on these campuses, there were the hyper engaged college Dems that are going to be at the event, but there were also groups of people showing up who came up to me and said, "Yeah, like I've never been to a political event before. I just felt like I needed to be here." That is what excites me the most.
And that's the difference between a moment, like the media was saying, she was having this honeymoon or a moment, and a movement. I believe that from the beginning. I love that. Amen to that. It's because she's just naturally part of the culture and engaged in it.
Exactly, and she's like super invested in it. Well, I'll share this. I don't like to share private stuff, but I think this is really interesting to know. Is that yesterday I spoke with her briefly, and even last week, and she had brought up how was the tour? How was the college tour? It kind of took me off guard. I was like, wait, you knew about the college tour I did? Like my little, I mean, there's so many, but it just shows me that as a principal and as obviously the leader of the campaign and party now, she has a pulse on the campaign and on what's going on. And she's like, personally wants to be involved in it, which is not normal in political candidates, even congressional candidates, much less a presidential candidate, to know about one of the trips a surrogate did, right? And so I think it just shows that she's personally really invested in young people in the youth vote, and she like personally wants to know how'd it go, like what can we do better, what are we doing the right way. And her favorite part of my explanation was telling her people showing up who didn't, it's their first political event.
Such a great story, and I'm really I love the way you're talking about all this, and it's new and it's interesting. As a young, slight, a formerly young person, that to hear the way this is all playing out right now. But as you said, you bring them in and then you talk about issues. When you're on campus, in addition to all the things you described, what are the things that are coming up the most from an issue standpoint? What are you hearing from folks that's they're most curious and interested in these events, the events that you're doing?
Well, the top issue by far on my back to school tour was housing. I mean, it's the top thing people kept bringing up to me. And another thing to back that up is I actually started one of the first congressional satellite offices on a college campus. So I have a satellite office on the campus of the University of Central Florida. We did like a ribbon cutting with the SGA and all this. And the top three issues students come for help on to my congressional official office on the campus is help with student debt relief, food insecurity, SNAP benefits, different things like that, and housing insecurity. Those are the top three people in terms of services. In terms of issues on the campaign trail, housing, the climate crisis, gun violence were the top three by far. It's the thing I kept hearing. And then a lot of students brought up other things. Obviously, what's going on in Gaza and foreign policy. There's some students who would bring up that up. There's other students who want to talk about civil rights, criminal justice reform. So, there's obviously a lot of issues young people care about. And the interesting thing is, I really feel like the age of the single issue voter is really going away. Because when you ask a young person, what issue do you care about? They're not going to give you one, they're going to give you several, right? They're going to like say, well, the climate crisis and yada, 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 but also gun violence because this, and this, and housing. I get this like level of intelligence on the issues that really gives me a lot of hope for the future of our country. Because even if a young person has a difficult time articulating it, they understand that all these issues are connected. And so they understand, like, okay, well, if we solve the housing issue, it's going to help us with X, X, and X, right? If we make sure that we, protect our democracy and that we expand the right to vote, it's going to help us fix the climate crisis and fight the climate crisis, right? And that just gives me a lot of hope because it means people are paying attention. I'll submit that, of course, we could do better in getting young people to go out and vote. Even though right now young people are voting at the highest numbers in the history of our country, we could still do better. But young people are voting at very high numbers compared to other generations. But I do not buy this argument that young people just are not aware or don't care about things going on. I think young people do care and they are very hyper aware of all the things going on around the world and domestically. But the thing is, when someone's hit with all this trauma and all this awareness of the issue, they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to take a turn and become very apathetic to everything and not want to be involved because it's so much, or they're going to take another turn and become involved and step into their civic power. And our job as leaders, as organizers, as advocates is to help steer people and give people a political home as to where they want to be involved and how much they want to be involved. But I don't buy that young people don't care. It's just the reaction to caring, the reaction to learning about things. How do we handle that?
Is that alarm on your end?
No, that's just our
The
voting
bells,
thing.
the bells
Oh,
are
no,
going. The bells.
no, that's
Yeah,
fine. And
yeah.
I know we're running out of time. The one last thing I really wanted to ask you about, Congressman, was we have heard so much. One of sort of the kind of storylines of this election has been the gender divide, especially among younger people. We watched a recent clip from Joe Rogan praising Vice President Harris and sort of mocking and making fun of Trump. And we know how influential he is with men of all races and backgrounds and ages. And we have heard a lot about this. Have you experienced that on the ground as much? And do you think that the gender divide is really stark with younger folks as the media has made it out to be?
Well, I don't want to completely discount the concern because numbers have shown us that especially with certain demographics, we've seen some men shift right. I think it has to do with a few things, and I think we need to do a better job of in the Democratic Party, and I think we're really doing that with men that are leading in our party, like Tim Walz. But we need people to really showcase what does healthy masculinity look like? What can that mean to people who are interested in learning about that and like consuming that kind of content and stuff? And I think for a lot of the kind of more masculine content that a lot of young men want to consume, they gravitate towards Joe Rogan, Turning Point, and like Tim Pool and all these people that for a lot of young people who are hit with issues and they pick who am I going to listen to, they can become radicalized. And so I think we need to step into that a little bit more. And I've been very encouraged by, we see this group, White Dudes for Harris, right? They just released the commercial. And at the beginning of the commercial, it says, white guys were blamed for a lot. And, some of us deserve to be blamed for a lot of different things and some of us don't. And, even though that kind of framing, some people might look at it and be like, like that doesn't hit me. For a lot of people, it does hit them, and like they do feel that way. And maybe putting that framing can help them understand and reel them in to understand these bigger issues and why Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the right people for everybody: white dudes, black dudes, Latino dudes, everybody. And I think the campaign understands that, and I think showcasing that positive masculinity, what does real patriotism look like? I think what does real freedom look like will help us with that as well. And I think the right wing, they really did and have been making a very concerted effort to bring in a lot of young men into their ranks. And I think that might be some of the reason we're seeing that. My anecdotal experience is that I haven't really seen any kind of huge shift on the ground, but I won't, that's anecdotal. I know the numbers kind of show a different thing. And so we want to respect that too.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for all that you're doing. Thanks for your inspirational leadership. And as I like to say, for all the good that we've already done, we all know the most important work is ahead of us. And I know you'll be out there leading the charge. Thank you so much for everything you're doing for all of us.
Thanks for walking the talk and running and representing and doing the campaigning, Congressman. It's so great to watch you.
Thank you so much.